Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. More people should try, at least occasionally, being audacious, beyond what most people would do. Of course, your audacities should have a reasonable risk-reward ratio. I want to share a few examples from my life. As I'm going to describe, some have worked well while others have been a disaster. But looking back on my life, my audacity has yielded more benefit than liability. And I'm sharing this with you to encourage you to replace maybe some of your undue caution with some calculated risk taking. A few of my wins, and I'll share the losses. When I was in college, I drove a taxi cab in New York City. And one night in front of the prestigious Rockefeller University, a distinguished looking gentleman flagged me down. And I asked him if he worked there at Rockefeller. And he said he's a professor of psychology there. And I explained that I was majoring in psychology, whereupon he responded, you might have heard of me. I'm Neil Miller. Well, I had. He was famous. He was the first guy to prove that biofeedback worked. So I said, I was serious, but I was using a joking tone so I didn't freak him out. I said, I'm not letting you out of this cab till you give me a job. Unfortunately, he laughed, and he said, write me a letter of application. And after my shift, which ended at midnight, I raced home, typed the letter at 2 in the morning. I walked to the mailbox. Of course, it was 1969, no email. And I got hired as a research assistant, which was key to my getting into a PhD program at UC Berkeley. Another bit of outrageousness helped me get into Berkeley also. I tried to get college credit for my work at Rockefeller. And the chair of the psychology department asked me what I learned at Rockefeller. And I said, I'm learning that even the most eminent people make mistakes, and they're even unsure of lots of things. And the chair said to me, that is worth 2 semesters of A. And so my GPA thus zoomed, and that really helped me get into Berkeley. But I guess I'm getting a little ahead of myself. My audacity started a lot earlier. After school one day when I was in the 5th grade, I sneaked into the empty auditorium and I started playing the piano. And I was fantasizing about what it would be like if the auditorium were full. Well, I was in reverie and all that, but it was interrupted by a teacher who demanded, what are you doing in here? I was really scared, and so I said, I'm sorry, and I ran out. But the next year, when it was time for elementary school graduation, my teacher asked me, I hear you play the piano. How'd you like to play at the graduation ceremony? Yes! And around the same time, I had gone bowling, and across the street, I was walking out my bowling ball, and I noticed a storefront with the sign Stephen Scott Orchestras. And I went in there and I asked her, how do I get to play in your orchestra? And I was really a young 12. The guy snickered and he says, I guess he was trying to show me that no 12-year-old could be good enough. He said, okay, kid, here's the piano. Play The Shadow of Your Smile, not an easy song, in the key of F sharp, which is a hard key. Well, fortunately, that's something I can do. So he continued to audition me after I played it, and I got hired. And I went on to play over 2,000 weddings and bar mitzvahs before I was 22. So my audacity paid off, at least there. Couple more examples of the positives, and I'll talk about more negatives. I'll talk about the negatives, or at least some of them. One night, I went to the Village Vanguard, which is Greenwich Village's preeminent jazz club. And the soloist was the famous pianist Jackie Byard. And when he took a break, without permission, I walked up to the stage and I played this really nice jazz tune called Spring Can Really Hang You Up the Most. And I got great applause. Good applause. Great is too strong. I got good applause, and Byard gave me 5, and I returned to my seat, a little embarrassed, but an awesome memory that I enjoy to this day. After finishing my PhD, I wanted to prove to myself that I could be a successful K-12 teacher before I deemed myself worthy of training other teachers. So I took a job teaching in a pretty tough school in Richmond, California. I felt I needed to be my most audacious self to do a decent job. And among the many, believe me, audacities I committed, this was my favorite. It was 1982. And that was when video games were really hot. And I phoned the Bally Corporation and I explained that classroom management was a challenge and that I would love to try an experiment in which I used video games as a reward for good behavior and for good learning. And I asked Bally, the Bally Corporation, would they be willing to donate a Ms. Pac-Man machine? That was the hottest game at the time. A week later, it was in my classroom. But as I said, my audacity hasn't always paid off. For example, I believe that field trips are very helpful to kids, but too small a percentage of my students would bring back signed permission slips. So one day, attendance in my class was light. I had 20 on my roll, but typically only 12 to 15 would show up on a given day. And this day, there were only 10. So I stuffed all 10 into my hatchback car, an old Chevy Vega, with some of their legs sticking out the back of the hatchback, some on the side windows, and off we went to a tide pool, and then we got to a bakery where they gave us an inside tour. Well, when I returned, the principal fired me on the spot. Do you know what an insurance risk you just took? And then there was a time I keynoted at the International Career Development Conference, and I decided to do it as Phil Donahue, complete with a white wig. And I did a opening monologue, and then I asked the audience a question, and I would run into the audience, stuck a microphone in the person's mouth, and I repeated that process throughout the keynote. The evaluations, horrible. For example, what the hell was that? This was a serious conference. So what's the takeaway of all this? In candor, my audacity has yielded even more serious failures than I've told you. But even audacious me is embarrassed to put them in writing or to share with you on a video. So suffice to know that risk-taking indeed can impose a price. But that said, despite the failures, having now been a career and personal coach to 5,300 people for 3 decades now, I believe that most people live lives of undue caution and that their lives would be enhanced by a bit more audacity. How about you? Anyway, I'm Marty Nemko. Thanks for watching.